So welcome everybody back to Tuesday night social distance learning with the Bench Doctor. Tonight we're going to be looking at some surplus combat guns, specifically a Tokarev, which is one of the guns that I have on my list that I must acquire. So hopefully in the not too distant future I'll be able to find one of these. But I'm looking forward to seeing it taken apart. We are streaming live on everything but YouTube because YouTube doesn't want us touching guns on live streams. So this will appear on YouTube after the fact. But we're on Twitch, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook on the main page, and we're on Facebook on our members lounge. So if you're asking questions there, be patient. I'm going to be running around between those pages trying to get to them. The best way to get your questions answered is to register for the event. And you do that by going to membership.theliberalgunclub.com and clicking on events and signing up. These are members only, but the best way to get your questions answered is to sign up for the event and show up here in the Zoom. The second best way to get your questions answered is to be on our members only Discord server in the live stream channel. And that's a reliable way for us to see your question and get it answered. Otherwise, it's a little bit of a crapshoot because there's only a couple of us doing moderation, and switching between the various platforms sometimes gets a little much, especially when we, the moderators, are interested in the content. I think that covers the bases. If you have your video on the Zoom, please turn it off. You are muted on purpose. We will take questions here in the chats that I just discussed, specifically Zoom and on the live stream questions channel on Discord. And like I said, we'll get to the others as we can. I think without further ado, I think we're ready to rock.
All right.
Scott, what are we doing tonight?
We're going to talk a little bit about this is the Yugoslavian M57, and it's called a Tokarev because it's based off of the Russian T-33 Tokarev. There are some a few minor differences. Essentially, it's the same gun. What I show you here today, how to take one apart, will be directly applicable to the T-33. The difference is that this takes one extra round. And so I would guess that probably the grips and things like that aren't interchangeable, but it will look the same to you if you have a T-33. I love these things. We've talked a lot about surplus guns over the last year, and this is one that if you're don't have surplus guns right now, or if you kind of missed the golden age of buying surplus weapons, these still come into the country. I've seen them at Classic and AIM Surplus and other places recently. Every time Classic says this is the last batch of these that are ever going to make it into the country, and then there always seems to be more, but they're still affordable. You can still pick them up in good shape for pretty reasonable prices. These are not a 9mm. There is a 9mm variant of it. I think the Chinese and the Yugoslavians made a 9mm variant of it. But these are this is in God's caliber, the 7.62x25 Tokarev. This is one of the rare times I'm going to have some live ammo. I'm going to go ahead and remove it before I start touching the gun. But this is what it looks like. It is essentially a 9mm case that's necked down to 7.62. And so it is a very powerful little cartridge compared to a 9mm. These have a lot of muzzle velocity. These things, this round will penetrate soft body armor. And it puts on a heck of, as any Soviet era gun does, puts on a heck of a smoke show and flame show. But this is what it looks like. You can see it's bottlenecked right here. This is surplus ammo from 1984, but there is factory ammo available for it. I'm going to go ahead and put this off to the side. So let's get started. So hold on a second. There we go. So this is the M57 from Yugoslavia. Like I said, it's slightly different, and I believe the Chinese made the same gun, takes an extra round. But you can tell the Yugos, they have the older grips on these have a star, and then there is markings that you can date at least you can date the grip. You can't really date the gun off of the grips because they're all interchangeable, and I'm sure these got re-armored and stuff swapped around. But this FRSJ, and then you can also date them based on the roll mark up here, counting the number of flames in that Yugoslavian Confederation. So using the information available online, this gun dates to the same year I was born, and that's why I bought it. It's pretty beat up. There's no finish left on it, but it's kind of neat. And originally these guns didn't have a safety. You can see this one has a hammer block safety in it. Some of the newer ones have a Glock trigger in trigger safety right here. And rather than drill a hole through the frame, they swap this piece out. And I'll show you how easy this is. If you wanted to convert one of these back to its original configuration, if you have that Glock type trigger in trigger, it's really easy to restore. One of these isn't, because there's a hole drilled right through the frame. You'll see when I take this apart. The other thing is the magazines for these, it's easier to acquire extra mags for the M57 than it is a lot of the other Tokarev variants. I don't know why, but these you can pick up, $20 to have a spare magazine. So they're easy to confuse with a 1911 magazine. That's what I don't like about them. So I try not to bring them both to the range on the same day. It's not that this would fit into 1911. You couldn't get a 45 ACP round in there if you wanted to. But anyway, so to take one of these down is pretty straightforward. You can see the gun's unloaded, a chamber flag in it, and you can see daylight through the mag well. And so they're similar to a 1911, but they made some changes. And my understanding is the changes were made to make the gun easier to manufacture, not to improve on John Browning's design, but the Soviets had to crank these out in big numbers in a hurry. So they changed the design a bit, but you'll see when I get into it that it looks very similar. But the first thing you're going to want to do with one of these, of course, is make sure it's not loaded. And then you have this little clip right here on the side, on the shooter's right-hand side. You just slide that back. And what that does is it unlocks this lever right here. This slides in and clips in and keeps this post from popping out the other side. But you can just push it and pull that lever out now. Set it aside. And the slide comes right off the gun like so. That's all there is to take the upper off. This one, some of these have a captive recoil spring, which makes them easy. Some of them don't, but this one does. So I can just pop the recoil spring out, set it aside, and then it has a lug like that, like the 1911 does. So this goes in and spins like a 1911. From there, you can then just slide the barrel out like so. And then to take the lower down, the trigger pack is interesting in these. It just slides right out. They're not usually this easy. This gun is pretty old and has been used hard. Sometimes you have to kind of pry them up a little bit, but the whole trigger pack just comes right out like that. Makes it easy to clean. And then the interesting part of these is the grips. You'll notice that there are no grip screws. In 1911, you'd have a couple of grip screws and a little bushing in there to hold them to the frame. This is one of the cool variants of it. I'm going to take the grips off and then I'll explain it. Once I get the grip off, it's easier to do that way than it is to try to tell you what I'm doing here. So. Make sure I get it the right way. So you see that what I'm doing is you have this little rocker thing right here, and I'm just taking a screwdriver and flipping this little rocker over. So what it does is it pinches the frame between this little arm right here and the grip in this gap right here. And that's all that holds that grip on, is you just flip that with a screwdriver one way and it moves it out of the way and the grip just comes right off. You can see it more now on the other side. The toggle is right here. You just kind of move it down out of your way and then that grip comes right off. So that's one of the big changes that they made is, and that's why these grips are not necessarily matched to the gun, because they're all interchangeable, and it would be pretty easy to lose or break these. But there is a website out there on these T57s or M57s that can help you use some of these cues to date these guns. So once you get this off, this safety, these guns didn't have safeties, like I said earlier. This one has the trigger block safety, and it just comes right out of the frame like that. Set that aside. Now you could just take the gun and run it like that. You'd have a hole in the frame unless you wanted to TIG weld that up. Probably not worth it on these. And then from here, if you wanted to convert your trigger surplus gun back, you can buy the original triggers, and all you do is just kind of push down and rotate it out of your way. Like so. Hold on just one second here. I did a video on this because this gun had the worst trigger of any gun I've ever owned, and I managed to fix it, and I figured I'd show it. So you have to push down on this little spring, slide this out of your way, like so. There's your trigger. And then this is the spring that I put in right here. You can see there is a little, let me see if I can get this on the video. There's a little roll or a little pin that comes through the frame, and this spring just clips up underneath it. And the one I had in here was much fatter, and it made the trigger pull just awful. Everybody would pull the trigger and look at me like, is the safety on, before it would break. So I found a place that had these springs, and I just put a new one in. That's what it looks like. It's just a flat little spring. I put one in, and it immediately made the trigger much nicer. So, but what I was going to do was, if it were like the old one, I was going to cut some of the metal out of the middle of it to try to lighten it up a little bit. But I didn't want to do it without a replacement in the event that I ruined the spring. But all this does, this little leg right here, just clips under that pin. And that's what, so that's how it goes, like that. So that's pretty much it to take one of these apart. You shouldn't have a reason to take apart the trigger pack to get in there to the sear and all that. And if you do, you're on your own. I haven't ever taken this apart because it works. So, you know, if it ever malfunctions or breaks or something, I'll deal with it. But I think I would probably just try to find the whole trigger pack off another M57 and drop it in there. They all have these stamped numbers in them. I don't know what this means, but you'll see this on the trigger and on the slide and various other places. It's here on the hammer, but I don't know what they mean, and I don't know the significance of it. This is 300002. This is 300001. It may be some assembly number. I don't know, but maybe somebody that's more familiar with these could enlighten us. But there's the back of your hammer. So that's pretty much it to taking one of these apart. They're really just super simple guns. They have this barrel link, like using the same mechanism as a 1911 that will look familiar to you, but other parts of it are completely different. Like, you know, there's no grip safety back here. The hammer's different. The trigger, the sear, all of this stuff is completely different than a 1911. But you can see where they got the idea for it from Browning's design. So anyway, let's put it back together. So the trigger just goes back in the same way you took it out. What I do is put it in through here, and then I just tilt it into place. And might have to compress that spring a little bit, but that's it. And then just make sure that this spring is pushing back and forth, so you have that spring tension. That would mean if you didn't, then you'd have the spring in incorrectly. From here, you can drop your trigger pack back in. As you can see, these guns that's why I love these things. They're They're just so simple. This one, like I said, if you buy one of these, this probably will be a little more difficult to get out, but don't be afraid to just, pry it out a little bit. Normally I don't recommend you pry on guns, but it's not going to hurt one of these. So from here, then we can put our safety back in, and you can see how crudely this thing was made. The ATF wouldn't let them import these without a safety. So over the years, they drill a hole through and made this piece and drop them in. Or like I said, they have the Glock trigger on them, Glock style trigger with the trigger and trigger. If you see one, they're especially sought after if they don't have any of those features, because that would mean it would probably be a bring back gun. The other thing to look for would be perhaps making sure that it doesn't have an importer's mark on it. This is electro penciled with PW Arms, Redmond, Washington. So that's the importer. So if it doesn't have an importer mark and a safety, it's probably a bring back because it wouldn't have been allowed into the country without the safety. So just drop that back in there, and you'll feel the little detent. It just has, somebody just peened a little divot in the frame here for the little detent there. And then the barrel just goes back in like so. Then you have to put your lug on. This will rotate into place just like if you're familiar with a 1911. Oops, I always get it wrong. There it goes. Other people might disassemble these differently, but this is just the way I do it. With these captive recoil springs, it makes it easy. So there's your slide. And just slide this back on, like so. And then you might have to put a little tension on that spring to get this to drop back into place. Slide this forward. Often people forget to clip that back, but at that point, the gun works. And then you check your safety.
And the possibility of the idiot mark on the thing with putting that.
Well, if you could, it would be awfully difficult to put an idiot mark on these because they don't work the same. Because this should just pop straight out. Once you pull that clip back, you should be able to just pull that straight out. I mean, this gun's almost 60 years old and there's no idiot mark on it yet. And I'm sure bigger idiots than I have owned it. It's pretty straightforward. But, I mean, never underestimate human stupidity. I'm not saying you couldn't, but it's fairly difficult. So, and then the grips are the same. You, as I was explaining before, you just put it back. You'll feel it seat itself. This inner part right here is machined to fit perfectly in this recess. So you just feel it set in there. Then you take a screwdriver and rotate this back so it captures those edges of the frame like so. You can see that's fairly well captured. And then this goes up over, if you have this type of safety, the safety's been, looks like it's been machined out a little bit or something to go over that. So that fits right there. And then what I'm going to do is look down the mag well of the gun and then just flip this the other way so that it captures that those frame rails. So I'm just going to go like that. And now it's reassembled. And this safety's terrible, so I never use it. I just turn it off like so. They're a really simple gun, and they work really well. Mine's been pretty reliable. That's pretty accurate, and I mean, I haven't shot it out past maybe 15 yards. It's not something I'm going to go out and target shoot with. I'm sure it's got to be a pretty flat cartridge as with the muzzle velocity of this thing, but it is a lot of fun to shoot, and I really. If you are interested in surplus guns, this is one that's still readily attainable at a reasonable price. And you can tell the T-33s because they're shorter, and then they have the older Russian ones are really the ones everybody wants, or the Eastern, or like the East German ones. And the serrations cut into it are completely different on the old T-33s. So they're really interesting looking. After the war, they changed them. So the war production and pre-war production ones from Russia are the ones that the collectors are really after. I don't think the M57 is really going to be all that collectible because it's probably the most common Tokarev variant you're going to find. And Ed and I were talking before we came on air. They did make this. They chambered it also in 9mm. And I'm not sure if it was after the fall of the Iron Curtain that they did that, but you can get these in 9mm Parabellum. So if you want the authentic one, you want the Tokarev. But if you just want a shooter, the 9mm Parabellum is a good little gun. It's just a single stack 9. It's not a great carry gun, and the ergonomics are nice in that it's a narrow gun. It's thinner than a 1911. It's not as blocky. So it wouldn't be a bad carry gun if it wasn't for the limited capacity and the janky safeties on them. But I enjoy shooting this thing. It's a lot of fun. So, any questions about these things?
Just one minor correction. When we were talking earlier, I said that I had an M57. I don't. I have something known as an M70A, which is indeed a 9mm clone of said Tokarev.
Yeah, I think it's virtually the same gun. It's just been chambered for 9mm because if you look, we go back over here and get a live cartridge. This is the same basic diameter as a 9mm. It's just neck down. So I wouldn't be hard to chamber one for 9mm. I wouldn't think. So anyway.
So one of our participants, Mir, he says the 9mm variants were made before the dissolution of Yugoslavia.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Production now too.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, but
he seems to be a little bit of a Tokarev nerd.
Yeah.
So maybe you need to chat with him.
Yeah, I'm not a Tokarev expert by any stretch, but I do love them. They're great guns. They run like a champ, and they're easy to take apart and maintain and keep running. Parts are readily available, at least for the Yugos. I don't know about the other variants of it. I would imagine it'd be difficult to find Eastern European or say a Russian or a East German barrel or something, but I don't know how much it differs from, say, a Romanian one or all the other variants of it.
The M70A that I have was pretty bloody common. So,
yeah, but I love this thing, and it's fun. They're very affordable. The Yugos are right now. Sometimes you can catch classic firearms. Be a little leery of what classic says about the condition of them. They've been known to stretch the truth. I found AIM to be a little more reliable in their descriptions, but batches of these still do make it into the country even today. And most of the ones you see come in now have the trigger setup, which is nice because if you can find a supplier of the old triggers, you can just swap it out and have it in its original form, unlike this thing that's somebody's molested. And you can see that just a very poor janky workmanship of just drilling a hole and throwing this piece in and then putting it in a box. I'd prefer to have the other style, but yeah. So anyway, that's the M57 Tokarev, and it's very similar to the T-33 and the other variants of it.
I'm looking at the other chat channels and seeing if there are any questions on that end. Danny, do we have anything that I missed in the chat?
I don't see anything. Again, Mir was kind of mirroring what you were saying or adding additional information for the people who are watching, but no questions.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the help because, like I said, I know what I know about them, but I don't claim to be an expert on any of this stuff.
Yeah, and that's why we love having our audience participate and supplement the information. Yeah, it's great.
So anyway, well, that's pretty much it. Short story today because these are so easy, such a simple gun, and pretty reliable.